Hi, everybody. This is La Gringa, Hadley Bajramovic here. I'm in my house today. And joining me is La Chapina, Zayra Ivette
Hola,
Padilla. She's also in her house in Canoas, in Guatemala. And
hola a
Zayra,
todos. Soy Zayra La Chapina y les saludo de Chapinlandia. We also call
Zayra, you
Guatemala Hadley
chose
Chapinlandia, like Disneylandia, las
what?
Disneyland. Like it sounds like Disneyland, but we call it Chapinlandia.
Oh, Chapinlandia. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
it's
cool.
another term to say Guatemala. Yes, I know we
I've
have
seen it
some.
before.
Yeah, Chapinlandia.
Chapinlandia. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
Zara's in Chapinlandia, and I'm in California. Um, and, because we're in California, we have a lot of experience in immigration. I mean, I call it special forces training. Since we've opened our office, we are now on client number 7,500, which, I can't believe we did. But Zyra, you really are missing an exciting time on in non Chapinlandia and Gringolandia.
Uh-huh,
We
Gringolandia.
found out. Yeah, we found out on. I was hearing rumors in the office. I was telling this
Mm-hmm.
story. I have one client. I'm going to call him Mr. S. And he came in on Thursday, and he was really kind. And I love talking to clients directly when they especially aren't attacking me, because a lot of clients attack me for what they hear from their friends. Like, why didn't
Mm-hmm.
you do this? He came in and he's like, well, my friends are telling me, and very sweet, that there's a new relief, because I'm married to a U.S. citizen, and this was Thursday. And I'm like, no, no, I'm Mr. S. If anything were really going to happen, I will know about it. I will know if it's real. And
Mm-hmm.
we will go through all of our existing clients and figure out everybody that can pivot. That's what we mean by change quickly to this new relief. And I haven't heard there, and when there's something real, I would know. Well, the next day, Friday, ABC, NBC, CNN, Reuters, AP blasted. Biden
Mm-hmm.
is going to announce on Tuesday that he will provide relief for undocumented people who are married to U.S. citizens who have 10 years of physical presence in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, stupid Pokey's barking at me. I know you guys can hear that. If you guys don't know Pokey, he's one of the mascots of the office. So Fernando, should I go grab him? Can you hear him? He's whining at me.
I don't know if you can hear. Sorry, Fernando, go ahead.
Will you grab Pokey and put him down because he's interrupting the podcast? Okay, so
I don't think you
when
can hear the
and
rain. Can you hear it?
well, there's a little bit of fuzziness in your picture, so it looks like it's raining. Thank you. So anyway, then there was also some mention that DACA is what I've seen. Now I'm seeing Dreamers could have access to a non-immigrant status, you know, if they have an employer or a job offer. So through the weekend, I was very excited, very hopeful about it. And then today, I haven't followed up if there was a White House press briefing to provide this additional information, but PBS wrote and shared an article that gave us more detail, and our producer Fernando is going to give us like some talking points about this that were AI generated. And I think they're going to give us more perspective today of what will be announced tomorrow. And of course, once we have the official announcement, we're going to know more. Fernando, are you going to share that with us? Is it in the chat?
That's just amazing news, right? That something like that could happen. I know we all know that elections are coming up, and there's this big you know debate over who's gonna be the next president. So I think it's just one of those things that really needs to happen. I mean, it's supposed to be this has is supposed to happen like long time ago, because there's so many people that are married to US citizens that are eligible to be able to get status, and they just can't because
Well,
they
Fernando asked me today to discuss this because people are posting or commenting in some of the articles that are being published. Well, U.S. citizen spouses have a route to a green card. Why is this helpful? I mean, so what people are right. A U.S. citizen does already have the right to petition,
mm-hmm.
their spouses. But if their spouse who is undocumented enter the U.S. without permission, then, well, there's another exception. Uh, Either they enter legally and they can adjust inside the U.S., or they enter
Without inspection.
illegally, they cannot adjust inside the U.S. And then there's 245I, which we still have people that are eligible for that.
Yeah, a
President
lot
Bush
of them.
announced that if you filed, yeah, it was about April 30th, 2001. Everything was around that date. You had to have something filed to be the beneficiary of an I-130 filed or a labor certification, and then you could adjust by paying a $1,000 penalty. And we still have people adjusting through that 23 years later. But
Mm-hmm.
the common um, process that Zayra and I recommend, if you enter the country illegally and you have a U.S. citizen spouse and you do not have any illegal re-entries, that's a problem in itself that causes a permanent bar and we can't do anything. Then you may apply for an I-130 petition for a family member. Once that, which takes 14 months, and then go through the waiver process, which now takes 42 months. And the waiver waives unlawful presence and forgives you for coming in illegally and staying in the U.S. You can do that while living in the U.S., but you don't get work authorization if you're the undocumented person. And then you have to go to an interview in your home country. And if you're from Mexico, for example, all these processes put together, it takes around 7 years right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the problem. And then, like I mentioned, if you have an illegal reentry, if you came into the US and then went back home and then re entered the US, most of the time you have a permanent bar. I mean, there's some exceptions and we have to analyze the dates and how you entered. But the permanent bar affects so many people in our area. And so, what I was thinking, Zayra,
Mm-hmm.
according to what I'm reading, if you're the spouse of a U.S. citizen, you can still get parole in place even if you have a permanent bar.
Yes.
Okay.
You get
Oh,
work authorization and defer action.
so we don't know if it's going to give you a mechanism to adjust into a green card, but that would suck if you can't, and it probably won't work because the permanent bar is part of IRA. IRA is a law that was passed by Congress, and I don't think an executive order can overcome that. But
Mm-mm.
it could at least get people with permanent bars work authorization for, it looks like, 3 years.
And while you were explaining that, Hallie, I was just looking at the visa bulletin that came out already on the July one, and it went a day. It was the 27th on June, and now it's the 28th for the 245I.
Oh, really? So what you're
Yes.
talking about is people who have 245I and who've been waiting for 23 years are now every month
Few
watching this
days
visa.
away.
Yeah. They're 2 days away from everybody who filed 245I 23 years ago from having their visa available. The visa bulletin is so complicated. We can spend one whole podcast on it and show that.
Es, es importante recalcar de lo importante que es este anuncio que va a dar el presidente Biden mañana. Y pues obviamente todos estamos a la expectativa exactamente qué va a significar este anuncio, este nuevo cambio. Todas las personas están muy esperanzadas porque se menciona que va a haber un beneficios para las personas que están casados con ciudadanas que tienen más de 10 años en este país y obviamente van a haber muchas cosas que se van a tener que cumplir además de esos 10 años, ¿verdad? Siempre platicamos con Hadley sobre las personas que tienen buen carácter moral, han hecho sus impuestos, no tienen ningún historial criminal, así que obviamente se va a anunciar eso y vamos a ver específicamente qué es lo que se tiene que cumplir mediante este nuevo beneficio que le darían a miles y miles de personas que están en este país por más de 10 años y están casados con ciudadanos de este país. Así que es bastante complicado porque muchas veces pensamos sobre las personas que entran en este país sin permiso o con permiso y están casados con un ciudadano. La mayoría piensa que es algo fácil y que esa persona debería obtener un beneficio inmediatamente, pero no funciona así. Platicábamos lo complejo que es sobre el boletín de visas, sobre cómo es como tenemos que ver cada mes dónde va avanzando, qué números en qué número de visa van, etcétera. Entonces, mañana estamos obviamente súper emocionadas y a la expectativa de qué es exactamente que va a anunciar el presidente Biden. Obviamente nos vamos a empapar de toda esta información para platicarles a ustedes qué significa, cómo puedo solicitar, si a mí me aplica, por qué no, por qué sí, etcétera. Así que estamos muy emocionados en la oficina sobre qué es lo que va a anunciar mañana. Como dijimos, es sobre lo que van a beneficiar a la mayoría de personas que están casados con ciudadanos de este país y eso sería un gran, gran cambio. Incluso las personas que tienen una prohibición permanente de no poder entrar, que significa que entraron doblemente después de abril del 97, podrían obtener un beneficio de todas maneras. Obviamente no podrían recibir la residencia, pero podrían recibir un beneficio por lo menos de un permiso de trabajo para estar en este país y poderse establecer mejor de lo que ya lo han hecho.
So I'm going to break it down. What's the significance of what the Biden announcement will be to undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens? I explained a moment ago that if you enter the U.S. without permission and have lived here all your life, then you have to go through a waiver process and ultimately go to an interview in your home country. So there is a law of adjustment. We commonly refer to it as 245A, and I like to call it a math problem, a math formula, or an algebra formula. A plus B equals C. A is if you have a legal entry. B is if you have an immediate relative petitioner, and there are two categories of immediate relative. There's a U.S. citizen spouse or a U.S. citizen child over 21. Those are immediate relative petitioners, equals an adjustment inside the U.S. So again, if you have a legal entry, immediate relative petitioner, then you're allowed to file an adjustment of status into a green card inside the U.S. So the relief that Biden has announced will be a phase one to that process of an adjustment of status, which would be phase two. So the undocumented spouse would apply for this relief that we call parole in place. And it's a legal fiction. So if the government grants parole in place, they will invite you into a local field office where they will pretend like there's an imaginary border that the undocumented person crosses, and they will have a legal entry, and they will be given the entry document called an I-94. The I-94 will prove that that undocumented person has now entered the country legally. And as part of that, there's going to be some kind of a deferred action type relief. I'm speculating, guys. This is not fully
Mm-hmm.
announced yet. So stay tuned. But there'll be accompanied with that parole document, I believe, a 3-year type deferred action that will allow the undocumented spouse of a U.S. citizen to have work authorization. And during that 3-year period, it will be expected that the U.S. citizen spouse will petition the parole in place beneficiary, which will be the undocumented spouse,
Mm-hmm.
in the green card process and adjust into a green card. And we have a kind of a proof of concept here in 2 types of relief. First, we have DACA. So with DACA's, that relief included advanced parole permissions. Now, all
Mm-hmm.
DACAs know about this advanced parole now. 5-6 years ago, it wasn't as commonly known. But when
We
you're in
still
DACA,
find a couple that,
yeah,
like just
that don't
last
know
week,
about it.
you talked to a young lady that didn't know about advanced parole. And we're talking about how many years now. So yeah, but most of
Yeah,
them do.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
11, 12. Yeah, so what it means is that somebody can apply to go out of the country and re-enter. So when that person who's DACA applies for advanced parole, that goes to Mexico, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
returns into the country, then they enter the country with procedural regularity and they obtain proof of a legal entry. And the DACA who does that and has an immediate relative petitioner adjusts. So when the DACA program started, and after a few years, they were estimated to be about 1.2 million DACAs. Now
Mm-hmm.
they're around 600,000. I've seen the number 500,993 today. So
Mm-hmm.
their numbers have been cut in half because of advanced parole, because the DACAs have been adjusting through advanced parole. And so that's what the benefit of this program will be to spouses of U.S. citizens who are undocumented. They will no longer have to go through the 7-year process, which requires a waiver and requires you to leave the country. And that's amazing. And, a lot of people have a lot of fear about leaving the country and going
Mm-hmm.
to the city of Juarez or Guatemala City or San Salvador, to exit the country, because if you're undocumented without lawful presence in the U.S., the law forbids you to adjust inside the U.S. That's why the requirement is that they have to go to their home country. I'll stop there,
And
Zara, and let you kind of
yeah, and there's so many
brief everybody in
people
Spanish.
that hear about, some friend that like never came back or stuff like that,
The
and it's
French,
just
yes.
like, no, we done it hundreds of times. You can do it. USA is giving you permission to go. It's not like you're going without permission. I mean, you're expected to come back without it. So, we always have to go against all the assumptions and all the stories that people
Yeah.
have about their friends, or,
The
some
family lore.
person that they heard. And we're like, but how was it? Well, don't have the details, but, they got stuck for 10 years, kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
pero sí,
And there's some big detail. Wait, Zara, I was going to say something before you go into Spanish. What this looks like, not so much like DACA, even though I used it as an example, I wanted to
mm-hmm,
show
mm-hmm,
how the number of DACAs went from 1.2 million to around 600,000. This looks more like military parole in place, where
mm-hmm,
the immediate relative spouses of people who served in the military is the same thing. They apply for a parole in place because they're, related, like an immediate relative relationship with somebody in the military. They're given a legal entry, and then they can adjust through the petition of the military immediate relative. So
Mm-hmm.
it's almost the same thing. It's just that it looks like now the requirement is that you must have lived in the U.S. for 10 years. We saw a requirement today in the PBS article that you have to be married to a U.S. citizen as of June 17th. And that's you're probably also going to have to
June
pass
17th,
background
like
checks
today.
today. Today, it looks like you
Oh,
have to be married to a U.S. citizen as of today. So I think the idea there is to prevent people from
oh
running
my
out and getting
gosh.
married once the announcement's
Imagine
made.
it's the specific day and everybody's like, oh my gosh, let's go get married. Like,
I know.
it's
Well, I hope
already
people are going out and getting married today. I mean,
5
because I think
o'clock.
about all the people where they're like, my spouse, my husband, my wife, and then we find out that they're not legally married. Uh
I
huh.
know, I get, I mean, so many times I'm like, uh, your partner? Oh, yeah, yeah, mi esposo. And I'm like, he's
Mi
not your
esposa.
esposo, es su pareja, no su esposo. And so, and they're like, oh, yeah, 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 but we've been together for 20 years. I'm like, oh, well, you're not legally married. So it's so funny how people get so used to use certain terms, even though they're not obviously correct, and we get so confused. So we have to always clarify. Okay, are you legally married? No, we're not. We're like, okay.
Yeah, we've learned to ask that question. Yep. So
Sí,
when you
entonces,
say you're married, does that mean you're married? Does that
I
mean you
know.
went in front of an official of the government and they married you, or does that mean you've been living together for 20 years?
Yeah, just recently, this lady kept saying, "Mi esposo, mi esposo, mi esposo," and we're like, "Are you married?" And she's like, "No." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Then no, sorry. I'm trying to see if
Yeah, so I'm sure we're going to have.
my little Mowglis are gonna show up and you know run in the background. Um, entonces lo que estábamos platicando con Haldi brevemente es sobre lo importante que es entender lo de cómo entramos al país, si fue sin permiso o con permiso y qué significa eso. Entonces, por ejemplo, las personas que tuvieron la gran ventaja de venir acá a este país con permiso, pues ellos pueden hacer su ajuste migratorio adentro de Estados Unidos sin tener que... Hablando de lo importante que es de cuando uno entra a Estados Unidos con permiso, porque puede hacer un ajuste migratorio, como decía Hallie, es una ecuación de álgebra, por decir que sería A, B igual a C, porque entra uno a Estados Unidos con permiso, tiene un esposo, esposa ciudadana en este país y puede hacer su ajuste migratorio. Pero obviamente esos casos son normalmente pocos comparado con toda la gente que entró al país sin permiso, que son la mayoría de personas que entraron sin permiso y por esa razón tienen que pedir un perdón. Así que esto sería algo inmensamente bueno para nuestra comunidad migrante de este país porque significaría que ellos pudieran hacer su ajuste migratorio entre Estados Unidos, obviamente teniendo una esposa ciudadana o un esposo ciudadano de este país y pudieran hacer su ajuste migratorio basado en eso. Es lo que Biden va a anunciar mañana. Estas son especulaciones, cierta información que estamos proporcionando, ¿verdad? Porque tampoco tenemos todo al pie de la letra. Entonces, mañana vamos a ver eso y lo importante que va a ser este anuncio para nuestra comunidad, para todas estas personas, porque, por ejemplo, los DACAs eran como 1.5 millones y ahora solo bajaron a medio millón, por decir. Entonces, todas esas personas que ya no están es porque pudieron hacer su ajuste migratorio, porque por medio de DACA se permite pedir un permiso para entrar legalmente al país y por esa razón muchos de nuestros clientes han podido hacer su ajuste migratorio saliendo de su país, aunque muchos tienen mucho miedo de salir porque dicen, ¿qué tal me quedo estancado en mi país? Yo he estado viviendo toda mi vida en Estados Unidos, yo no quiero salir, yo quiero vivir aquí. Entonces, por eso es tan importante informarnos bien, porque siempre salen con que fulano y mengano se quedó allá y ya nunca regresó y nunca lo volví a ver, pero esos casos son casi, o sea, mínimos, 1 en 1000, pero siempre se corre la voz en ese tipo de casos de que sí sucedió y te puede suceder a vos, pero tenés que tener toda la información clara para poder realmente entender cuáles son tus opciones en vez de asumir que porque le pasó a fulanito o menganito, a vos también te va a suceder. Obviamente eso es importante de recalcar.
So, tomorrow we'll know more and we'll be able to break it down again. And yeah, I don't know if, Fernando, if you're able to put up any of the requirements on the screen as we're reading them today. And some of the ways I'm seeing it reported are conflicting. Like I saw one article say that you must be married for 10 years to a U.S. citizen,
Oh,
which I don't believe that's going to be the case, because that's kind of that would eliminate a lot of cases.
yeah.
Another article said
Because there's gonna be
you
like
have
we
to have
mentioned just
10 years.
today, if they need the requirement of the 17th, then there's gonna be all these people who they're gonna get married today and they're not gonna be eligible. We're like, great, let's divorce.
Right. No, I think they're just looking for people that are legitimately, like, valid marriages. I mean, they can still test marriages that happen after the announcement for validity, but, that's one of the patterns that I've seen in these kind of announcements, like with President Bush, who said on December 20th, if you're here today, for the sunset version of 245I, then you're eligible up until April 30th. And then with President Obama, if you're here today, and that was, I think, June 12th, then you're eligible for DACA. And so now if you're married today, that sounds more like in line with what's happened with prior orders like this. And then what it appears to me now is that you have to have 10 years of physical presence in the U.S. and married to a U.S. citizen as of June 17th to be eligible for the parole in place for immediate relatives of U.S. citizens. And then the other relief that we're seeing is a dreamer relief. It doesn't seem to apply too much to only DACAs. It requires that the applicant have a degree, a college degree, and we'll find out, what types of degrees they're going to consider in that definition, and then also a job offer from a potential employer. And I'm sure that's going to need a lot of instructions and defining for us. Because like with H-1Bs, there's a very specific type of job that must be offered. And I don't know if there's going to be restrictions around the type of job somebody has to be offered. But we will know a lot more tomorrow, and we will be back to interpret what we understand the announcement will entail and how it's going to help, hopefully, more than 1 million Americans obtain work authorization and have a gateway to obtain a green card that we don't have today. So thank you very much, everybody. And I am La Gringa signing off, Hadley Bajramovic. We lost Zayra to the jungle of Guatemala already, and hopefully she'll be back tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.
Ali, can you hear me?